in your word. Open my eyes. Open my eyes to see. Notice what he said, wondrous things. So it's possible that you can be seeing in the midst of wonderful things and not see them. You can be in the middle of beautiful things and not see them. I want to tell you a quick story this morning. It's a true story that will set up what I'm going to preach about, and I'll give you the title in just a moment. It's a true story about a man by the name of Mr. Russell Conwell. Russell Conwell lived and wrote a booklet, not even a book, but a booklet to business people in 1890, and it became such a smash hit in 1890 that it sold 7 million copies. Before internet, before TV, before radio, 7 million copies. He was asked to come give the speech, which really was just a speech that was printed up, a little booklet. And when he came and gave the speech, he did it 6,000 times. And between the profits that he made off of the 7 million copies of this book, off of the story that I'm going to share this morning, and the personal appearances, he had enough money to start a university called Temple University up in Pennsylvania. That whole university now, tens of thousands of students, is there because a man heard one story and shared that story, and it birthed hope in people's lives. Here's the story quickly. I'm going to sum it up and I'm going to preacherize it. That means a lot. He did not add spiritual points to it. It was a secular talk, but it has deep and profound spiritual lessons in it that I want to give you quickly this morning. And I'm going to sum the story up. Here's the story. He was traveling in the Middle East, Mr. Conwell, and he wanted to tour the Holy Land. He wanted to tour the Middle East. He was going by camelback. Of course, back then they had to stay in tents and had backpacks and so on, and he had a guide, an Arab guide. And at night, the Arab guide around the campfire would tell stories. And one night, to entertain Mr. Conwell, he said, I want to tell you a story. The guide did. He began to say and tell him this story. He said there lived in South Africa a man by the name of Ali Hafid. This is a true story, by the way. Ali Hafid. He was a farmer. He had meager harvest every year. He had a little plow, and he had a little meager cabin, and he had an ox, and he had a camel. He was by no means a wealthy man, but he scratched by, got just enough to make it by. It was a hard day in, day out, putting the work in the farm, plowing the fields, working hard. And one day a traveler came by, and back then in the Middle East, there was the law of hospitality, that if a traveler came through, you showed them great hospitality. And this traveler began to tell this man in South Africa that was farming this land, he began to tell him a story as he was having him in his little cabin and feeding. He said, it's a shame you have to work so hard. And I know that you work every day and you work so hard. He said, but have you not heard? And it was back in the time when in India they were discovering the first diamond mines. And he said, you should go to India. You should search for diamonds there, because people are becoming fabulously rich, instantly wealthy. And he described it like this in the little booklet. All you have to do is go between the place where there's between two mountains. It's called the Valley of the Moon. There's a stream that's flowing, and all you have to do is reach down and pick up the diamonds right out of the river, and you'll become fabulously wealthy. And the farmer worked on, the man left, the farmer worked on. And one day, he just rolled that story over and over in his head. It just got the best of him. So he came in and he announced to his family that he was selling the farm, that he was going to go search and go to India. He was going to find those diamonds. He took the money and put it in a little sack, hugged his little wife goodbye, and kissed his two little children, and had them a temporary place to stay. And he said, when I come back, boys, you'll sit on thrones like kings, and we'll be fabulously wealthy, and it's just going to be an amazing life. And as the story goes, The man went to India. He never found the diamonds. He ended up in Barcelona, Spain, and in a moment of desperation, he decided to take his own life. And before he jumped into a raging stream, he took a pencil and wrote these words, "There are no diamonds anywhere," and left that note for his family, and jumped into that raging river and tragically took his life. It's a sad story, but the story's not over. This is where it really gets interesting. Again, this is a true story. There came a man who bought the farm that the man had been working. He bought the same plow, the same ox, the same camel, the same little meager cabin. He lived off the same scratch-by amounts of food that he got. And he was working the farm, and one day he was out in one of the fields, and he was plowing, and he kept plowing up these annoying black rocks. And he would throw them over to the side, and he'd go a few more feet and hit another snag. And sure enough, it was these black rocks. And one day, as he was plowing, he hit one of these black rocks that was particularly large and beautiful. When the sun hit it just right, the colors of the rainbow would sparkle in this black rock. So he thought to himself, I'll just go back, I'll put this rock up on the mantle in my little cabin over the fireplace, and it'll, lighten up the place a little bit and be a decoration. And he set it there, and about a day later, the local priest came by to welcome this man and his family to the community. And he invited them to, come and be a part of what he was doing in his church. And this is what he said happened. While they were talking, mid-sentence, the priest sees back behind this farmer that black rock sitting up on the mantle. And he said, "Where did you get that from?" He said, "Oh, I got it out in the field." It's unique, isn't it? He said, "Unique? Do you understand what this is? This is a diamond in the rough. This is a diamond, sir, and it's the biggest diamond I've ever seen in the rough." Sure enough, to make a long story short, they had that rock checked out, and back in the 1800s, that one rock was worth $25,000. It then became the birth of the world's largest diamond mine, the famous Golando diamond mines, where the Queen of England buys all of her diamonds. All of the diamonds in her crown came from that place because their diamonds are of such high quality. Think about what I just said. That man who flung himself into that river in Spain and took his life never realized that he actually had been living on acres of diamonds. Everything that he thought was out there somewhere was right where he was living, but he didn't have eyes to see. He didn't appreciate what God had given him. And sometimes the Bible reminds us that we need to be reminded that the eyes of the fool is on the ends of the earth, and we don't even see the good in the marriage that we're in, the ministry that we've been given, the job that we have, the opportunity, the children that God has given us. We don't even realize we're living in acres of diamonds. You may not realize it today. And the people that you talk to usually when they're in a crisis and in a storm, they don't realize it. But our job is to remind them, if God has put you there, and if God has allowed you to be there, you're living in acres of diamonds. We find this story repeated again and again. I'm just going to give you another quick one, and then I'll get right to my little preaching part, okay? In the same little pamphlet, he tells about in Pennsylvania, a farm, a man who worked the farm for 23 years, a dairy farm, and was very annoyed because right down the middle of the property, there was a stream, and it stunk to the high heavens. And he dammed up the stream because the cows wouldn't drink the water. And so finally, after 23 years, the guy said, "This is stupid, I give up, I'm selling this piece of property," and he sold it for $833. The whole farm, $833. The next owner came in, and he undammed the water and had it researched, brought someone in, and sure enough, it was pure coal and oil that was causing that strange odor, and it ended up being $100 million farm of oil that he never realized he was on, the man who sold it for $833. And today the city of Titusville stands on that farm and the wells flow on. They were living in acres of diamonds. I want to preach for just a few moments on acres of diamonds, because I don't think we understand the hidden potential in the present job, in the current relationship, in the location that you're in. The answer for your dreams may be found at your fingertips. And the only way that you can see it is if God opens your eyes. Before making a big change in life, before you ever decide to just walk away from a situation, a marriage, a family, a home, we need to remember that we could be walking away from acres of diamonds. The truth is, when I read the story of the prodigal son, I've often wondered, what was he thinking when he walked away from the Father's house with all of the blessing that the Father had for him? I'm sure, it's my sermon, I can preach it like I want to. I'm sure that he had friends that were saying, man, out there, they're really living. Man, out there, the grass is greener on the other side. Boy, if you could just get out of your Father's house, I'm telling you, we could have the good life. It's always out there. Never realizing that where he was acres of diamonds. And you know the story. He ends up way out there, losing everything and eating swine food, and only to come back home to the very place that he left to discover there were acres of diamonds in the kingdom, in the Father's house, that he never saw when he was there. And I preach and I reach, and we have a youth conference that has 14,000 kids that come from all over the United States. And one of my assignments, I believe, is to teach kids that it's not out there, that the joy is not out there, the Hollywood crowd, the lies of culture, the lies of society, but it's right here in the kingdom. We're living in acres of diamonds. If you have Jesus Christ, you are wealthy beyond compare. You have unsearchable riches. I'm gonna take a praise break, and I want everybody to thank God that right now, I know everything's not perfect in your life. I'm a preacher right here. See, that's what I do. I have a license. I think sometimes if I could get the job, if I could get the house, I'll be happy. If I could get the car, if I could get my ministry, if I could be that big, if I could reach that many, if I could enlarge my world big enough, somehow we think it's always out there, and we don't understand. I'm living in acres of diamonds. If I've got my health and my soul is right with Jesus, and I've got my wife and I've got my babies, and sometimes my family may be going through stuff, but what I have in Christ right here is worth going through the heat and the fire and the pressure, because there's diamonds in every crisis. There's diamonds in every pressure situation. Say amen, somebody. Amen. If you can't give me a Baptist nod, I'll take a Presbyterian raised eyebrow. Give me something right now. Come on now. Amen. Amen. You see, in the process of making a diamond, it takes time and it takes pressure. A diamond is born because of intense heat and pressure. Without heat and pressure, the carbon monoxide just remains cold. If the pressure is just right, if the heat is just right, and that clump of rock is willing to submit to the heat and pressure, at the right time, a diamond is born. Guess what I'm trying to say to you is teach people not to run from their trials. For in them you will learn more. You will become more. You will do more. He won't put more on you than you're able to bear. But God knows exactly what is involved in birthing a diamond out of you, out of your children, out of your marriage. So many people get in a marriage and they forget that there's diamonds, acres of diamonds in that marriage, because they get in a hard time, in a bad place, and the heat and the pressure is on. You know, when you first get married, it's ideal. Oh, they come in for counseling, premarital counseling. When I used to do it, they would come into my office, and they didn't sit in the 2 chairs. I had 2 chairs in front of my desk. They would sit in 1 chair together because they couldn't bear to be separated, holding hands, rubbing legs. And it's just ideal. What makes you think that God put you together? Oh, Pastor, it's so amazing. We like the same things. He likes pizza. I like pizza. It's God. It's God. We knew God has confirmed it so many times. And they just go on, and you know, and that's great. That's how you ought to start marriage. And it starts out ideal. And then 6 months after you're married, or sometimes much shorter, it becomes an ordeal. And then if you're not careful and you don't get help, you get to thinking this is a raw deal. And the next thing you know, you're looking for a new deal. But in every marriage, there are acres of diamonds. My wife and I have been married 32 years, and we've been through the fire and the pressure. And I'm so thankful that she didn't leave me and I didn't leave her. But through it all, we're in a season now when we're those little children that I had 5, 2 years apart. They were like 5 little drunk midgets every morning running all over the place. Come here, get them, grab her by the head, grab her, get them out, throw them out of the car, get them to school. Peace, peace. Anybody know what I'm talking about? I don't have to make this up. That was my world. You know, when you first get them, they're so wonderful. Oh, they're beautiful, they're cute. Then they become teenagers. The Bible said that the kingdom of heaven is like a man who found a treasure in a field and he bought the field. You ever read that? In other words, you can't get the treasure without the field. In the field, I'm going to throw this in there, I'm just preaching it like I want to. The field probably had some old tires and some snakes and some pollywods and some mud holes, and you can't get the treasure without the acreage, the field. So I promise you, if you've got a crazy teenager, you know there's a treasure, but now you got to deal with the field. But buy the field. Love them anyhow. Hold to them anyhow. Stay involved. Keep calling. Keep reaching out. It's never wrong to love. It's never compromising to love. You're never letting down your standard to keep pulling those kids in. Doesn't matter how much of a mess they get in. There's acres of diamonds there if you won't give up in the heat and the pressure. Clap your hands and say yes. There's acres of diamonds. There's acres of diamonds in every church, in every ministry. But you have to be willing to say, God, open my eyes. I'm not seeing just the negative stuff. I want to see the good. Let me give you a quick example. Abraham and Lot are in a family squabble. You know the story. Abraham was the elder. Lot was the youth. And he should have honored the elder, but instead, when the shepherds got to fighting over land, Abraham, the peacemaker, goes to his younger nephew and he says, you choose the well-watered plains, the beautiful green grass. Just beyond that was the twin cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. The bright lights of Las Vegas were shining in the green pastures. Or you could choose the desert. And the Bible said the younger said, oh, I know what I choose. He didn't show any honor to the old man. He said, I choose the green grass of Jordan, and I'm going after those bright lights in that city. And he takes his family, and he goes out looking for acres of diamonds. But I never read that he found them. As a matter of fact, he lost his wife, and he lost his integrity, and he lost the purity of his family, all by searching for acres of diamonds. But watch this now. Abraham goes the opposite direction, and he's out in the desert. He's out in the wilderness. There's nothing out there but stars and sand. And when he wakes up one day, God opens his eyes. Open my eyes to wondrous things. If I'm here and you planted me here, there's something I'm supposed to see in this season of my life. Don't move me. Don't get me out of here. Don't give me a bed of ease. I'm in this dry place, hot place for a reason. And when he looks down, he gets a vision that you can't get in the bright lights of Sodom and Gomorrah. He sees sand, and suddenly his eyes are open, and he sees natural Israel as the sands of the seashore. So shall your seed be. He looks up and he sees spiritual Israel, the church, as the stars of heaven. So will your seed be. What happened? One saw the natural, one saw acres of diamonds. That's how it is. When God opens your eyes and gives. When I went to Gainesville, Georgia, it was a small little country town. Our only claim to fame is we're the poetry capital of the world. The Lord spoke to me and said, I'm going to cause chicken to have you preach all over the gospel all over the world. And I would get up in that little tiny church and I would say, one day we shall preach the gospel from these red clay hills of northeast Georgia to the whole world. And those few people, Hazel, did he say the whole world? But I didn't see a little country town. I saw acres of diamonds. Yeah. I saw soul. We got to get a vision for acres of diamonds. I think about the fact that there's a story that's told of the phenomenon that takes place in South America when the Amazon River flows into the Atlantic Ocean. The Amazon, the mightiest river in the world. And back then they could only communicate with flags. And there was a ship that was in distress. The men were thirsting to death. They were 200 miles from shore. And they saw another ship, thankfully, come on the horizon, so they communicated with flags. And he sent a message, we need water, please help. And the ship that was passing sent back a response, let down your bucket. And he said, I'm working hard up here, come on. And the other guy says, no, we're thirsting to death. You don't understand. We need water. We need water. And the guy sends back a last little flag text on his way off to the horizon. Let down your bucket. The captain said, I don't know what that means, but we're going to give it a try. We don't have anything to lose. He let down his bucket. And when he pulled it up, true story, it was clear, cool water. What he didn't realize is for 200 miles where the Amazon surges into the Atlantic Ocean, that cool, fresh water presses down the heavier salt water. And the whole time they were thirsting to death, there was living water up under them. All they had to do was let down their bucket. If we could only convince people that are thirsty, that are dry, that are empty, if you'll just let down your bucket, there's living water that can satisfy and heal and restore your life. I close with this thought. But I often think of that cross that Jesus hung on. But there were 3 crosses. And there was one on one side, a thief. And when he looked at Jesus on that middle cross, he saw trash. He saw a nobody, a piece of nothing, bleeding and dying. We sing about the blood. We sing about the cross. This man was hanging there, about to go into eternity. And when he looked at the blood that we sing and get emotional about, he couldn't see it. He saw trash. He even went out on his fleeting breath cursing the Savior. Another thief on the other side looking at the same cross and the same blood and the same nails and the same crown of thorns. But his eyes were open. And he didn't see trash, he saw a king. And he said, when you come into your kingdom, remember me. And in that moment, because his eyes were open, he saw acres of diamonds. He saw the greatest treasure earth has ever been given, bleeding and dying and carrying our sins and our sorrows. And it made such a difference. And I'm telling you that if you know your soul is right, you're living in acres of diamonds. I almost, when I was pastoring, said, I'll be happy if my church gets to 500. When I got to 500, I wasn't happy. When I got to 1,000, I wasn't happy. 5,000, 10,000. It was, that stuff will never be enough. So I finally realized at this stage in my life, I am living in acres of diamonds, and I'm not going to probate my praise. I'm going to be thankful. I'm going to be grateful. I've got more to be thankful for than I do to gripe about. Everybody take a praise break and give the Lord a mighty praise. You may have trouble that you're going back to, but you're living in acres of diamonds. Ask God to open your eyes. I have 1 minute and 16 seconds, and I intend to use it all. I want to show you something in closing. Steve Wynn, according to Forbes magazine, is worth about $3 billion. He's responsible for rebuilding, rebranding the Strip in Las Vegas. Las Vegas Strip. He's built some of the most famous hotels in the world, the Bellagio, the Wynn, the Mirage, and on and on and on. And he has a love for art, a love for art. And one particular piece of art that meant a lot to him, it was more than a piece of art, he was emotionally tied to it, was one called Le Rêve. And that's French for the dream. And he said it represented where he came from, nothing, not having anything, and the dream of the life that he's living. He so loved this painting that he put it up, and this is just a duplicate of it. He so loved it that he put it up in the lobbies of his hotel so the guests could enjoy it, and the guests could see it, and, just talk about all the man had was a dream. It's a Picasso, by the way. And so he loved it, and he paid $50 million for that painting that looks like this. $50 million. He sold it 5 years later for $155 million. He got over the dream. And $155 million. And so he decided, I want some other art, and that'll enable me to get it. So I'm going to have a party in Vegas to say goodbye to the dream. Say goodbye to the dream. So he invited all of the most wealthy and famous people. They came in from all over the world, flew in on their private jets to celebrate the dream and say goodbye to the dream. He got up in front of almost 1,000 people, and he had the dream behind him on an easel, and he was talking about it. And Steve Wynn has an eye disease, and he has trouble seeing sometimes, and it affects his equilibrium. And when he stepped over to refer to the dream, he lost his balance, true story, and his arm went through the $155 million painting and tore it right there in front of the whole world. Well, naturally, the man who said, I'll pay $155, he's an investment banker in New York, he canceled and said, that's not worth anything. It's trash. It's no good. I'm done. I want my $155 million back. But this guy, Steve Wynn, so loved that painting that he said he had a $50 million insurance. Of course, he gave the money back to the man, and then he had a $50 million insurance policy, and he wouldn't even cash in on that. He said, I want to restore this torn dream. Wow. He goes to Europe, and he searches all of Europe for what he called an art surgeon who could put the dream back together. And he finds a man, and it takes him 1 year. See, we want quick results all the time. But if you're going to find the treasures in the acres of diamonds, sometimes the word restoration has in it rest. We always talk about restored, but it has rest, and sometimes it takes a minute. 1 year, the art surgeon worked. And after 1 year, he had another party, and he brought it out, and they said you could not even tell that the dream had been torn and destroyed if you looked on the outward. But if you turned it on the inward, you could see that some art surgeon had been working inside so that what people looked at, they saw this. But the real issue was what had happened inwardly. Somebody had taken the time to heal the broken dreams. Now here's the most exciting, and I close with this. The most exciting thing to me about the story, I could not believe it. That's when the preacher in me came alive. The same man who said it's trash, throw the dream away, it's worth nothing, that marriage will never be any good, that child is always going to be an addict, that relationship between that father and daughter will never be restored. Some will only see trash when the dream is torn. And the same man who said, give me my $155 million back is trash, he now calls up much more humble and says, I'll buy it for $189 million. It was worth more after the dream was torn and ripped than it was before it was ripped. How many of you know we have a God who can restore the years, the cankerworm and loaf? And the whole key to it is who you put your broken dreams in the hands of. And you know what? God is trusting you to be art surgeons who take the broken dreams and not see trash, but see acres of diamonds that can be restored, and God can do a new thing in their life. Would you stand to your feet all over the room? If you feel comfortable, if you don't, that's fine, but this is just how I do it. If you feel comfortable, would you just throw up your hands toward heaven, and in an act and in a place of worship right where you are, just begin to praise God out loud and say, Lord, thank you for the acres of diamonds. I may have problems in my family, problems